Welcome to the Revo Report. We're inspiring faith with reason and reason with faith. And what has influenced your decision in actually researching near-death experiences, deathbed experiences? We have a giveaway announcement today. We will be giving away Surviving in an Angry World by Charles Stanley, the Bible Study Teacher's Guide, right there, Bluetooth headphones right over here, open ear, very comfortable. And also we will be giving away this very cool old school analog watch. All you need to do is be subscribed, like this video, comment down below, and we will do a random draw next week to see who the winner is. Make sure to also hit that bell notification to be notified because we will announce it in one of our videos next week. All right, let's get back into it.
Sure. Well, it kind of came upon me as a surprise probably 12 to 14 years ago when a relative asked me to read the little book Heaven is for Real, which a movie was made of about the little boy who had claimed to have had a near-death experience. And I read it reluctantly because I thought, well, this is somebody's experience. I'll just have to believe it. And does this really have any evidential value at all? And when I read it, sure enough, I thought if I knew the family, maybe I could discern more as to whether to believe it or not. And but it was a heartwarming story. On the cover, it said that had a blurb. Actually, in the opening matter, it had a blurb by a physician, Dr. Long, who said that he's studied thousands of these experiences and that this was consistent with his research. And I thought, somebody's been studying these things? I thought it was just personal testimonies going through the web or people writing books on it that had no evidential value. But I thought I need to get in and see what the studies say about it. And I was just shocked to get in and find out that there were very well done studies by very reputable academics and physicians on near-death and deathbed experiences. And to me, they had implications for the afterlife. Now, to back up, why was this interesting to me when I got into it? Because I became a believer as a sophomore in high school. I went on a retreat because a girl I liked was going, which has reached a lot of people. And but I gave my life to Christ just because it seemed like if God loves me, then he has the best life for me. So what am I doing fooling around outside of his will and missing out on his best? And John 10:10 said, I came that they might have life and might have it abundantly, or a full and meaningful life. So it made sense to me because at that time I believed there was a God. After that, my doubting started. A lot of people talk about their doubts before they become a believer. For me, it was after I became a believer. I started reading people and talking to people on my high school campus, and people had legitimate objections to the Bible. You know, what about evolution, how that relates to the Genesis narrative? And I would pray and ask God to help me through my doubts. But the only way I could find assurance was to go and study the best of both sides of issues to draw my own conclusions. So I would go through these phases of doubt, and then I would work my way through them. And it involved prayer. It involved staying in the Bible to make sure I understood what the Bible said rather than stereotypes of it. But it involved studying out the evidence. And I just saw no difficulty in that being a thing, since the Bible itself talks about basing faith on evidence. In fact, Jesus at one point said, unless you people see signs and wonders, you simply will not believe. And in the original Greek, that's like a double negative that's emphasizing it, that there's no way they're going to believe unless they see something special. So it was no problem with me saying, look at the evidence and read both sides.
Right.
Eventually, as I went through college and seminary, and my curriculum read like a God search, I wanted to see the best of both sides. I studied under people at the University of Georgia in the philosophy and religion department, studied in conservative circles, went through graduate school, and that helped to resolve my doubts. But never in all that time did I see anything about near-death and deathbed experiences. I just assumed I would hear occasionally about something. I think, okay, that's just personal stuff. What evidence could I have? It wasn't until I read that book and that propelled me into the research that I started saying, oh my goodness, this is really a powerful layer of research. And we see visions all through the Bible. Why should that have seemed odd to me? I was not growing up in Pentecostal circles, mostly in a Bible church, for example, or traditional Baptist church. And they just didn't talk about visions there, especially anything happening now. So this was a total shock to me. And I can't get over the study. It's too fascinating, and it's been personally very compelling to kind of finish off the evidence, put the icing on my apologetic cake, so to speak.
Wow, that's fascinating. And was there a particular time or moment when it's really, really supercharged your faith in God, or really solidified your faith in God?
I'd just say it was a slow process. When I began to read people like, and I'll just show you some of the books in case you want to retrace some of my steps. Dr. Sabom, Michael Sabom, he's a cardiologist who didn't believe in near-death experiences at all. Someone did a presentation on Raymond Moody's book, who really started the research on near-death experience back in 1975 with a publication of a book called Life After Life. Somebody gave a presentation. Michael Sabom was there, and somebody said, well, what do you think of this, being a physician? He said, I don't believe it. He said, my patients don't talk about this. I just don't believe in things like that. So a nurse said, well, I'm presenting on this again in the future. I'd love for you to interview some of your patients and see what they say. And so he started talking to his patients, and I believe it was the second patient told him of a wild near-death experience consistent with the typical things that people talk about, like going through a tunnel, having a life review, all these type things, presented it to him. And he was just shocked. And he said, well, I still think this is just a naturalistic thing, but I'll set up a study. He would eventually teach at Emory University, teaching cardiology there. So he was not your typical cardiologist next door. I mean, he's actually teaching in a very reputable medical school. Right. So he began to study these. And what he did is he set it up like a scientific experiment. He said, let's take my patients who claim to have left their bodies during cardiac arrest and clinical death, which is cessation of heartbeat and breathing. So at that point, very quickly, your brain activity in an EEG will just kind of flatline within like 20 seconds. And yet they're claiming to have these experiences. So I'll ask those that say they came out of their bodies and look down at themselves in the resuscitation and ask them, what happened during your resuscitation? And they reported to him. And he said, amazingly, these people were right, even in significant details that are not typically a part of resuscitation. But then he had a control group of patients who had a cardiac arrest, experienced clinical death, but did not claim to come out of their bodies. And he asked them what they thought happened during their resuscitation. They always got their stories significantly wrong in significant details. So the others couldn't have been guessing just from what they thought what they remember from a TV medical show or whatever. And it took him about a year into this research before he said, these people are coming out of their bodies. So, I mean, this is not an easy read. He's very detailed. He's very analytical. He's skeptical of these things, and he's talking to patients, comparing them to doctors' records, just like legal evidence would in evaluating someone's testimony. So once I read books like this, I thought, my goodness, this is a scientific investigation of an experience that has radically changed this person's life. Maybe they were an atheist and they became a believer in God because of it. Maybe they were living a totally selfish life and realized, wow, material things really aren't that important. I need to start living for other people, produce life change. And I found like 12 lines of evidence that were more consistent with the afterlife hypothesis than the dying brain hypothesis. So slowly I began to just let the evidence build up. Also, there was later Consciousness Beyond Life, Pim van Lommel. He was in the Netherlands, where most people don't even believe in the afterlife. Very different culture. And yet people were having the same experience with the same elements in it. why would this be? So I began to just look at it from the perspective. So I'm not as much like an authority on near-death experiences as these people who've done the actual studies. By the way, he published his study in The Lancet, which is one of the top medical journals, if not the top in the world. So this is very well respected in the medical community. But I began to see that, wow, there's actually evidence for the afterlife. And a lot of these people don't really go that direction with it. They just kind of leave it that these people came out of their bodies and don't try to compare it to religious studies or to give a strong argument for the afterlife. So I think my expertise would be looking at the best studies of near-death and deathbed experiences and evaluating them for their evidence concerning the afterlife.